Hello, everyone. I'm glad that you see you here. Today is Wednesday, March the 20th, 12:30 Rio de Janeiro time. As usual, we're gonna be discussing topics of interest to the expat and foreign citizen community in Brazil. So let me know in the chat window what you wanna have discussed here live in our live stream. A couple of news. We heard about some potential immigrants abroad saying that they are facing a tougher time when getting visas to Brazil. Usually this is gonna come from developing countries. For developed countries, as long as you have the requirements, you are almost certain to get a visa. But naturally, for developing countries, this is not always the case. So we have even received an email from an attorney in one of those developing countries saying that the Brazilian embassy in particular is toughening up the standards for visas to be granted. And that was a little bit surprising because the current administration, they been revamping or doing tweaks to the Brazilian immigration framework, but because of their positioning as a left wing or a left positioned government, they are usually tougher with more developed countries, like they just did with the United States by starting to ask a visa to U.S. citizens, and this is scheduled as we speak for April the 10th. But the surprise is that they are also toughening up with developing nations, which we didn't expect at all, right? Like the idea was make it more difficult or at least more costly, because the idea is not like to avoid, foreign citizens from developed countries to come to Brazil, but the idea is to just make an extra buck on them, right? But to make this more difficult on developing countries, particularly some nations that historically have a lot of claims for asylum and humanitarian visas. That was quite a surprise. Okay, so I'm not sure if the current Brazilian federal government, if they are just trying to change things across the board, and as an unintended result, like this is making the lives of immigrants more difficult across the board. Maybe it's like an unintended effect, but that's what we are seeing, that's what we hear. Okay, so I wanted to share this. It looks like an interesting development. And let's see, we have here WS, welcome back, Bill. Oi, Luciano, a little clarification on background checks. Is that a FBI check by a FBI approved channeler, or is it by Idento and the state one lives in? Okay, so Idento is one of the sources that we recommend, and there are also the FBI approved channelers. So if you just Google FBI approved channelers, they're going to have a list. But there are other providers who are going to partner up with an FBI approved channeler to get you the FBI background check. Okay, so Idento has a very good reputation, and even though if they don't show up as an FBI approved channeler, I'm sure that they are going to work with an approved FBI Chandler to get you the FBI background check. IdentoGo is going to change the services that they offer depending on the state. So if you go to the IdentoGo website and you just click your zip code, you're going to know if they offer the FBI background check or not. I don't think, Bill, that you need to stick to the FBI approved channelers. I mean, if there is one in your state, or if there is one that you're familiar with, or you Google it and it looks like a good choice, by all means proceed with the approved channeler. But like I said, there are other companies working with the approved channelers to get you the FBI background check. Okay, Bill? Bill has another question. What is the tax ID in Brazil? Would one still need it if one only works for 2 to 3 weeks? No link for free ebook work visa. Is there an ebook for e-visa? Thank you. All right. Yeah, we don't have an ebook for the electronic visa, right? The electronic visa is still like in the early stages, and as you probably know, or we just said over here, at least as of today, you don't need a visa as a U.S. citizen to travel to Brazil. You can travel under a waiver, and there is an expectation that next month, on April the 10th, yes, you're going to need the electronic visa. But I did complete a couple of applications myself just to see how the system works, and our team, they have done, I'm going to guess, probably 20 or 30 applications so far. So we've been testing the system. The system, in my opinion, is very cumbersome, right? Like, you're going to see, if you try to use the official system, when you get to the point in which you need to provide the documents, there is a bunch of options over there that are not related to most of the cases, right? Like, they developed a kind of catch-all electronic application system, and in my opinion, it's super cumbersome, okay? And so that's why we don't have an ebook. Like, I mean, in my opinion, there should be some tweaking to the electronic visa system eventually. And so if we develop an ebook now and they change this system like a couple of months down the road, all the work that we did for the ebook is going to, go wasted. So we're just waiting for the e-visa application system to stabilize, to be a little bit more, a better rounded system in order to get something together like this. In terms of the tax ID, as a visitor, you don't need a tax ID. Okay, and if you're visiting the country and you're going to attend like a some type of convention, or if you're going to have some business meetings under the scope of the business visa, right? The temporary business visa, it's still a visitor visa, but oriented to business. You don't need a tax ID, okay? But there is a presumption that you're not going to be working in the context of a worker in Brazil, right? Like, I mean, you're doing some business meetings, you're attending a conference, you're doing some type of stuff, but there is no, like, let's say, labor effect in the country. That's the idea, and then you don't need a tax ID. Now, if you're gonna work on behalf of a Brazilian company in Brazil, you would actually need a temporary work visa, and in this case, it does not matter if it's going to be for 1 day, for 3 weeks, or 3 years. If you're going to work for a Brazilian company with a labor relationship that's understood as happening in Brazil, then you're going to need not only the Brazilian tax ID, but also the work visa, the temporary work visa. All right, Bill. And one more nuance, the tax ID, when we handle the applications, the visa applications here at the firm, we usually get the CPF as part of our services because this is going to enable us to do the schedulings on behalf of our clients, right? So instead of you going to the Polícia Federal with your belly against the counter and asking for spots and trying to make sense of a system that is not designed for immigrants to handle on their own, we get you the CPF, and through the CPF we are able to schedule like your interview when the time comes for you to get the residency in Brazil. Let's see what else. Hightower 52, welcome back, Hightower. I know you've been here before. I'm glad you have questions for us. What happens if someone applies for a Viper to real estate and then during the process the minimum amount is changed by the government? Would it mean that the application would not be valid? Hightower, so historically, the Brazilian government, they give you a time window to clean up whatever immigration applications are on the table. So if that pattern holds with the current administration, yes, I mean, whatever you have in the system, it should be good. Most probably than not, it's going to be just like the electronic visa, maybe, not as convoluted, but they would say, listen, starting on October the 1st, instead of 1 million reais, now you're going to need to buy a 1.5 million reais property to qualify for the Viper. And this is pretty subtle in immigration, like this idea of giving notice. Particularly when they are going to reduce rights, when they are going to expand rights, then they don't give any notice because it's reasonable that you don't need to give a notice to give something better to people, right? Let's say if they would reduce the amount from 1 million reais to 800,000, they could do like overnight, basically because everybody would be happy, right? But if they're going to do something that from a certain perspective is going to reduce the rights of immigrants, like, increasing the qualifying property amount from 1 million to 1.5 million, then they are going to give notice. And we would expect the government to give notice, and it would be very highly improbable that they would deny, particularly applications that were filed and waiting for a result. Ankur Malhotra, all right, Ankur, welcome. Thank you for joining us. Hi, I am an Indian citizen planning to visit Brazil. How is the process like, and can a visit visa to be converted to temporary residency visa for gainful economic activities like establishing a business? Ankur, so I don't know from the top of my head, like, if what type of visa Indian citizens would need, but I would assume that you do need a visa. And usually you apply through a consulate. Each consulate has different rules in terms of how to apply for the visa. So you should pick, not sure how many consulates Brazil has in India. I would assume more than one, in addition to the embassy. And you can check the specific requirements with the consulate in charge of your geographic area in India, all right? That's going to be the visitor visa that you're going to work on. After you have the visitor visa and you enter in Brazil, something important for you to understand, even if you have like an idea of maybe staying longer in Brazil, whenever you arrive at the customs, you need to have an intent, like what you're gonna tell the customs worker, it gotta be compatible with the visa that you have. So if you have a visitor visa, what you're gonna do here in Brazil? I'm gonna stay here. I'm gonna visit Rio de Janeiro. I'm gonna go to different tourist attractions. I'm gonna spend my vacation time here for a couple of weeks or for a couple of months, whatever it is. Or if you have a temporary business visa, then you can say, yes, I came here for a conference. I'm going to meet with a couple of companies. I'm not working here, right? Like, you don't need to explain yourself. I'm just providing some feedback, some additional context information. I'm not going to be working here. I'm just going to be attending meetings, okay? That's the intent. Like, you need to have an intent that is compatible with your visa. Okay, that's the first answer to your question. The second one, if you can convert the temporary visa to residency. Yes, that's something surprising to many people, but is actually pretty common in the immigration framework. You can enter Brazil as a tourist. You can enter Brazil under a waiver, right? If you travel up to April the 9th, you can basically, if you are a U.S. citizen, right? Not an Indian citizen, but you can basically enter Brazil under either a visa or a visa waiver, and you just enter in Brazil for vacation, okay? And then 1 month down the road, and there is no timeline. You could literally do that like a week down the road, right? Although it wouldn't be very common, because again, you have the intent of entering the country to do tourism, and then a week later you change your mind. It sounds funky, right? So usually a month later, maybe you decide, you know what, I'm loving Brazil. I want to stay here for longer. In this case, you can apply for a bunch of different residencies, okay? And this is a silly distinction. People from the immigration industry, they make a big deal out of it. But just for you to understand, like if you apply outside of Brazil, you are applying for a visa. If you are applying while you in Brazil, you're not applying for a visa, because visas, they are not issued in Brazil, they're issued abroad. So if you are abroad, you apply for a visa. If you are in Brazil, you apply for a residency. Again, silly distinction. Let's not make a big deal out of it. To give you a concrete example, if you are in the United States or if you are in India, you can apply for the digital nomad visa. And if you apply while you're in India, you're going to go to the consulate, you're going to handle the paperwork. They can give you the digital nomad visa, and then you travel to Brazil under the digital nomad visa. A different approach is for you to come to Brazil under the e-visa, right, or a temporary tourist visa. Once you are in Brazil, then you can apply for the digital nomad, but then it's not visa, it's the digital nomad residency, okay? But city distinction, let's still call it the digital nomad visa. So a short answer is yes. Once you are in Brazil, you have a bunch of different routes you can follow depending on your specifics, Ankur. I hope that was helpful. I think we have someone else from Bill. WS. WS is Bill's nickname here in our life. Also, when one gets a birth certificate, the meaning of original. U.S. passports require a birth certificate to get a passport. Then one would still need both for Brazilian immigration. Yes, so let me see if I got your question right, Bill. Your reasoning here is, why do I need to present a birth certificate if to get a passport in the West, I have to present my birth certificate? So maybe it's implicit in your question that a passport by itself should satisfy the Brazilian immigration. The reason for the Brazilian immigration to be so attached to birth certificates is to find out the names of your parents. Okay, so let's say in theory, some countries they may have the person's parents' names on it. Extremely rare, but yes, there are exceptions. So if your passport has your parents' names on it, Brazil does not care about your birth certificate. Okay, but since like for everyone from the United States, your passport is not gonna carry, is not gonna show your parents' names on it, then yes, you're gonna need to provide your birth certificate, and this birth certificate needs to be original, apostilled, and sworn translated in Brazil. Okay, now let's tackle the original part of it, because I think it is something that you also want to understand why it should be original, right? And the meaning of original, it's here in your question, right? So whenever you talk to a Brazilian officer, they're going to very clearly say, listen, I need an original birth certificate. And by original, and you need to understand how we handle birth certificates in Brazil to understand why they would say original. So by original, they're not saying the same one you got when you were born, right? That would be a silly request to be made. They mean an official birth certificate issued by the department in charge of birth certificates in your country, and when we are talking about the United States, more specifically in your state. Okay, so let's say depending on the state, in the United States, a state may issue like a beautiful, colorful birth certificate, while in other states they are gonna issue pretty much a transcript, like it looks like a common sheet of paper with your information on it, and then they are gonna stamp something like valid copy, right? So if they're stamping something as a valid copy, there is not much you can do. You cannot go to the Department of Health in your state and say, well, this thing says it's a copy, like Brazil is not going to accept. No, you should be fine, because again, by original, the Brazilian immigration officer meant something that you're getting directly from the authority in charge of birth records in your country, or in the United States, the state, right? So that's it. Like, you don't need the same one you got when you were born, or your parents got when you were born. You need one from the department in charge of birth records. Now, just for you to understand why Brazilians keep saying original, because in Brazil, you can have as many birth certificates as you want, and all of them, they are going to look pretty similar. They're not going to look the same, because like in my case, my birth certificate was issued over 5 decades ago. Okay, so back then there was no computers, right? So it was like done by a machine, and it was like full of stamps and stuff, but it wasn't as it was not the same as it is today. Today, the certificate is going to be issued on a special type of paper, just like you have a special type of paper for money. Brazil is going to have a special type of paper for the certificates, and I can go to the registry and ask, I want my birth certificate, and they are going to issue a brand new original birth certificate for me, with all the colors, all the seals, all the stamps. And in theory, this one has the exact same value as the one my parents got over 50 decades ago. Okay, so I hope that helps explain why Brazilians keep talking about original. But short answer, original simply means a birth certificate that you're gonna get from the department in charge of records in the jurisdiction in which you live. Keith, welcome, Keith. So pleased to see you here. Is the process for a foreigner getting a CPF while in Brazil still to go to a bank first, then to the IRS, or just the IRS, and is an appointment always required for the IRS? Keith, I wish I had a straight answer. This process has been changing substantially since last year. Just give an example, right? Like, I mean, we gave both recommendations for one of our clients last year. I think it was around March. And he went to a bank. The bank said, we don't do CPFs anymore. So they basically kicked our client out. And then our client went to the IRS. And believe it or not, the IRS said, listen, there is an email address you can use to get your CPF, and you don't need to stay here, because otherwise you're going to need to wait for a couple of hours, and then you need to schedule an appointment, then you need to come back, and there is this whole nonsense. So because there is the email address you can use to apply, get out of here, okay? So that was March of last year. And then, unfortunately, in October of last year, October of 2023, the email route was terminated. I like to joke. The Brazilian authorities, they were paying attention to the email route. They said, you know what? This route is too easy, right? That does not look like Brazil. And they got rid of the email route. Now, foreign citizens, they don't have the email route, and the routes available are consulates, right? The consulates now, they need to issue a CPF. Some of them, like if you go to the consulate, maybe they don't know yet, like the particular officer taking care of you. They could say, well, you can just apply by email. And then you can say, no, the email route is over since October. And then they're going to talk to your supervisor. And then they're going to come back and probably help you get the CPF on the spot. All right, you don't need to schedule to come back. Like they give you the CPF on the spot. That's the consulate / embassy route. A second route is the one you're asking about, is like when you are in Brazil, what do you do? Like banks, it could be a hit or a miss. If you're going to try a bank, I recommend Banco do Brasil, because Banco do Brasil is like a bank from the government, and therefore they have a better integration between their systems with the Receita Federal or the Brazilian IRS. So in theory, if you go to Banco do Brasil, they could handle from the beginning to the end, okay? And going to the Brazilian IRS, it could be potentially a good idea, because in theory, like they have everything you need to apply. I saw, like, kind of recently, people going to the IRS. They give you a kind of protocol, something like, you need to come back here in 20 days. And it looks like they're doing some type of research, probably to make sure that you don't have an existing CPF. And then 20 days down the road, you would come back to get the CPF, right? That's the second route. The third route is through a powerful attorney holder, basically meaning someone would do the legwork with the IRS on your behalf. We do assist with IRS here at the firm. We charge a fee for doing this service, and usually we can get it in about 20 days for you. Some foreign citizens, like, they get, this kind of, like this nonsense from the IRS or from the banks, that they say, listen, I'm here in Brazil, but I still want to hire you, and we get it from them, and then we still face the aggravation, but that's not going to be you, right? It's going to be our team members, and this is just part of our job. So, and by the way, we do that for all our immigration clients, okay? So if you are handling your immigration with us, your needs, it does not matter if it is like digital nomad, retirement, permanent residency, Viper, like, we get the CPF on your behalf and you don't pay anything extra. All right, let's see what else we have over here. We have Michael Jean. Michael, is it your first time here? If it is, welcome. Good morning, Mr. Oliveira. Regarding to the digital nomad visa, does your firm apply on behalf of someone who's outside of Brazil? Michael, yes, we do apply, and we usually apply still in Brazil, and the reason for that is for you to skip on the health insurance requirement. So we advise you, like most of our clients, they start like this. They say, listen, I'm going to be, let's say we are in March the 20th. The client says, you know what, like I want to travel to Brazil in May. And then we say, yes, so let's do like this. We're going to work on your paperwork for you to apply for the digital nomad visa as soon as you arrive in Brazil. And because you're going to be actually applying in Brazil, we're going to be able to skip on the health insurance requirement, which is a pain in the neck for most applicants, right? And if you are from the US, in parallel, we're going to help you with the electronic visa so you can enter Brazil as a tourist, right? You get, in theory, the 90 days. And in the meantime, we are finishing up your application for the digital nomad. So another good thing about this strategy is that you get a couple of months in addition for your digital nomad timeline. All right, Michael. All right. Bill, WS, muito obrigado. Agradeço todo o seu tempo e esforço para nos ajudar a vir ao Brasil, Bill. Yeah, thank you, Bill. Thank you for your kind words. Yes, we work hard, to assist with the expat and foreign citizen, community. And you're very welcome. Thank you for making always interesting questions. Because that's how we can share. Experiences. And I know that, for instance, they learn a lot from other people like you. All right. Ankur Malhotra, thank you for your relevant guidance. Thank you, Ankur. Hope to see you again over here. Thank you for bringing some variety to the questions. Like most of our clients, they are indeed from the US. So nice to see a folk from India over here. I didn't have an opportunity to know most of India. I just been to Mumbai and Pune. It was a really nice trip, like spent probably 15 days. But that's India is a word by itself, right, Ankur? Like, I mean, and you guys now have even surpassed China in population. There are so many different, not sure if I should say languages or dialects in India, but it is certain, like almost like a continent, right? Like India is such an interesting country. Okay, Michael Jim. Yes, I just found your channel. All right, Michael. Now, yeah, I hope to see you often here at our live streams. We have a lot of people who choose to have consultations, and then they have a one-to-one time with us, and then they feel more comfortable about sharing their specifics. Particularly when it involves family or financials, potentially romantic relationships in Brazil. But I'm equally happy when people come to our live streams for information. All right, Michael. So just to make this clear, like you are welcome to come back and participate as much as you want. All right, Hightower 52. Does the Viper visa get approved at the embassy consulate, or does it get approved in Brazil? So Hightower, the Viper visa, because it's a visa, it does have a component at the embassy and consulate. So traditionally, the way we apply, there is of course, like the real estate acquisition process, which, by the way, it should be reviewed by an attorney or a law firm like ours. Okay, you just don't go out there and buy a property believing that this property is going to qualify for the Viper visa, because that's not how it works. There are at least 10 different factors impacting on whether your transaction is going to qualify or not for the Viper visa. Okay, so that's my first tip to you. Don't just go out there and buy a property. I've been in. I can tell you how many consultations I provided for people who bought the property without guidance and bought a property that would not qualify for the Viper. Okay, so that's the first recommendation. Now, getting back to the process, you buy the property in Brazil, and then we gather the documents, we apply for the Viper visa in Brazil, and we get like the approval from the Brazilian Ministry of Labor in partnership with the Ministry of Foreign Relations. And then once this is published at the Brazilian newspaper, is called the I forgot the name of the newspaper, but it's like a special type of newspaper that is just like to give public notice about all the, not only like immigration affairs, but things that in order for them to become valid, Diário Oficial da União, DOU, Diário Oficial da União, which means the Union official newspaper, right? Like a rough translate. So that's how they make things public, and in order for some laws and regulations and decisions to become legally valid, they need to publish this stuff. Okay, so again, you buy the property, we gather the documents, we apply, we go through every single requirement. There is usually some back and forth during the application process with immigration. We get your application approved through a publication at the DOU. And at this point in time, we collect everything, all the documents, and we send over to the consulate or embassy in charge of your address abroad. And then you need to attend an interview with this embassy or consulate to have the Viper visa issued. And then it's an actual visa, a beautiful visa. This visa is going to be attached to your passport. And this is going to be the basis of your journey as a resident in Brazil. This said, like we know that Brazil is now trying to offer a route for you to apply while you're in Brazil. We haven't tried this route yet. Like we are most probably be able to try this route in a case that on an ongoing case we have here at the firm. And if it works well, we're gonna let you know. But so far, every single Viper visa we got went through this route, right? First approval in Brazil. After the approval in Brazil, we send the paperwork to the consulate abroad, and then you attend the interview abroad, which is basically just, checking your documents like passport, birth certificate, criminal records. We usually recommend that you have all the files at hand if they ask you for. We never had a single application denied. Out of those transactions that we did supervise, right? Like, I mean, there was a few cases that came, like, again, unfortunately, from people who didn't have supervision during the property acquisition stage. And yes, like they didn't have the required paperwork, and then, the application was not approved, okay? Wilbert Bailey. Wilbert, welcome. Not sure if Wilbert's first time. Anyhow, welcome, Wilbert. I plan to go to Brazil from the US in May for 3 months. When can I get back to Brazil? When can I go back to Brazil after the 3 months with a tourist visa? Right, so let's assume you're going to go in May. So let's assume you're going to spend May, June, and July. Okay, so you spent 3 months and then you leave Brazil. The most conservative recommendation we usually have is like you're going to have a 1 year. You need to stay 1 year out of the country. You get your 90 days renewed, right? So if you are staying in Brazil for May, June, and July, so you should potentially come back to Brazil in June. That's the most conservative recommendation we usually share with our clients. But we not only share the most conservative route, but we actually share things we see happening. So interestingly, there's some people who are going to travel abroad and then they are going to come back and get an additional 90 days. Okay, that happens. Like sometimes people go to Argentina, which is a neighbor country, and then when they come back, they get an additional 90 days. So that was more common in the past, but nowadays it looks like immigration is catching up with this challenge that they have for sure in terms of counting the days. So we see more often people saying, well, I was expecting 90 days. And that's going to be a consultation, right? Like these clients, they are going to usually show up as a consultation. They schedule a consultation with us and they say, listen, I'm getting 90 days. I've been traveling to Brazil often. I always get 90 days. But last time I came, they said I have 2 weeks to stay in Brazil. And they are going to say, what's going on, right? Like, and the answer is the 90 days is always per year. And it looks like the Brazilian immigration does not have a really good way of counting the days. And because of that, you've been getting the 90 days, even though you should not, okay? The rule is 90 days per year, is not 90 days per trip. There is no fresh 90 days every time you enter Brazil, okay? That's not how it works. But because the Brazilian immigration is not able to count the days, you end up getting a bunch of 90 days every time you enter the country, but this is changing as we speak. The right rule is 90 days per year. If you look at the regulations, if you look at the law, or if you ask like Polícia Federal when you are trying to renew or to extend your stay, they are going to say very clearly 90 days per year, not 90 days per entry, right? So again, I told you like the two extremes. The one extreme is like to be as conservative as possible. So if you stay from May to July, you should wait for a full year before coming back to Brazil. So you would be able to come back to Brazil in June of 2025, right? At the same time, I'm telling you that there is a bunch of people still going to Argentina, coming back to Brazil and getting a fresh 90 days. But like I said, this is going to be less and less the case, and people are going to realize that the Brazilian immigration is kind of getting the gist of how to enforce the 90 days per year. Hightower 52, thank you for the response. You're very welcome, Hightower. Let me see if we have any other participations. All right, yeah. So I'm gonna share because we have people interested in the Viper visa, and I told you guys about the qualifications for both the property and the transaction to be valid for a Viper visa. Even if you're not buying a property for the Viper, or in other words, like you're buying a property in Brazil, but you're not interested in permanent residency, I strongly recommend to hire a Brazilian attorney, okay? And you don't need to hire our firm, although our firm has been traditionally assisting the expat and foreign citizen community for, basically almost like 2 decades now. And the reason why I'm saying that is because you can lose your shirt in Brazil, okay? Like, and some markets, they are like more challenging than others. But just to give you like a basic example of what happens, like when you're trying to buy a property without an attorney, there is a bunch of sellers in Brazil that they are going to try to sell a property with no legal title, okay? Or they are going to be selling a property that has a legal title, but they are unable to convey the legal ownership. And surprisingly, it's not just like, whenever we think about these horror stories, usually the northeast of the country, which is like one of the last developed areas in Brazil, are going to come to mind, or the north, that because of its sheer size, it also faces a lot of issues related to property titles. But this actually happens even like in Florianopolis, right? So Florianopolis is the capital of Santa Catarina. It's a big magnet for foreign citizens in Brazil. It's a very well-developed area of Brazil, but for historical reasons, they still have issues with properties with no titles. And if you buy a property with no title, you are basically buying on a possession basis. And if you lose the possession, you don't have title. Okay, so that's as bad as it sounds. I like sometimes when our participants here, they jump the gun and they say that's utter nonsense. How can someone buy a property with no legal title? And I wish everybody would have the same mindset, but surprisingly, every single week we have someone coming to us, well, there's this property, the seller is a friend of the family. You're going to hear all types of stories, but it's surprising to me that a foreign citizen would consider buying a property on a possession base only, okay? But that happens every single week, right? So, but that's one of the first things why you should have an attorney, because sellers usually they're not going to tell you, well, I have a no deed property, right? They are usually going to try to frame, of course, from a much better perspective, saying, well, this land or this property has all the papers, right? And then you say, what about legal title? Well, the legal title, I've been working on it. It's almost about to be issued. I don't have it, but it's pretty easy to obtain, right? And then when you think about, like, this seller has the property for 20 years, but he never got the title, and he still says it's easy to get it, right? So common sense should preclude you from entertaining this type of nonsense, right? So that's the first problem. The second problem is one of the top 5 problems I see is like fraud against creditors, okay? Super common in Bahia. I don't know if we're just unlucky, but I would say 40% of the properties that come to us, like whenever we have a new prospective client and they say, listen, here is the property, right? It's in Salvador, Bahia, or is elsewhere in Bahia. Sometimes also common in Rio Grande do Norte, but Bahia, the front runner, unfortunately. And when we take a look at the papers, you're going to be dealing with a front person because the actual owner is like being chased by debtors, right? So they're going to transfer the property to deceive creditors, and the actual owner has like criminal lawsuits. It's a whole mess, okay? And if you are dealing with a realtor, the chances of the realtor telling you that are not high, okay? Usually when you have an attorney on your side, the attorney is gonna be paid no matter what. So the attorney does not have a conflict of interest. When you're dealing with the realtor, there is a huge conflict of interest, because you either buy the property that was presented by the realtor, and the realtor is going to make some money out of the transaction, or you're going to buy from another realtor and the realtor is going to get zero, okay? So the realtors, they are going to bend backwards to have this transaction true. And this is my problem. Okay, like we have and listen, I don't have a personal problem with realtors. We work with realtors. We actually recommend realtors, right? We have realtors to recommend in Fortaleza. I have realtors to recommend in Florianópolis. I have a bunch of realtors to recommend in Rio de Janeiro, naturally. I have realtors to recommend in São Paulo. And we do recommend, but unfortunately, like, I mean, some realtors, sometimes they are, particularly when they are not well established, smaller operators like in Bahia, Rio Grande do Norte, Ceará, right? I mean, they are going to push transactions that, in my opinion, they should never be presented in the first place. So fraud against creditors, true fall the Northeast, okay? And if you buy a property such as property that's being in risk of being attached because of fraud against creditors, maybe the seller is going to be able to show like the paperwork needed for a closing, but there is always a chance that the creditors are going to find out about the transaction later on, and it does not matter your legal thesis for why. Well, I bought the property, so I have the title, right? That does not preclude a creditor that was deceived by the actual owner to come after the property. Okay, that's a point that goes beyond the understanding from realtors, and that's why I'm sharing here with you. All right. So I see here that we are probably a few minutes from the end of our live stream. Let's take a look and see if we have additional participations. German, good afternoon, my friend. Good afternoon, German. You are a little bit late today, but thank you for joining us, and I'm glad to see you here. Hightower 52, have you ever facilitated a purchase in Fortaleza? And if so, was it more difficult when compared to Rio or São Paulo? Right, so I'm going to tell you a secret, Hightower. I spend a lot of time in the year in Ceará, and probably more time in Ceará than São Paulo, okay? And yes, we did help with countless transactions, not only in Fortaleza, but other parts of Ceará, like Jericoacoara, one of our main clients. He has over 20 properties in Jericoacoara. He's like an investor. We did assist like a bunch of expats with romantic relationships in Fortaleza. I don't know what's going on with Fortaleza, but particularly U.S. citizens, they love people from Fortaleza. So it's super common for us to have like people who are either engaged with someone from Fortaleza or, has like a more longer-term relationship, and they say, you know what, like I want to buy an apartment. Some transactions, they are for really low amounts because real estate in Fortaleza is kind of cheap, right? Like it's not like Rio de Janeiro. So some people are going to buy a property like for $100,000. They're going to buy a really nice apartment and they are happy with it. Other clients, they say, listen, I really want to, enjoy, like some people are like in their retirement years. They say, I don't care. I'm going to spend, I don't know, like $500,000 US dollars, and then they're going to buy a penthouse, like a beachfront penthouse for $500,000 US dollars, and they're going to live like kings. Okay, so Fortaleza, Ceará, in my experience, like it's not as bad as Bahia. Okay, Bahia, again, maybe we're just unlucky. Bahia for us, every single transaction is a battle, right? Is a battle for the client to avoid, like sellers trying to deceive creditors, all kinds of nonsense. It's super common in Bahia. Okay, you do see something like this every now and then in Fortaleza, but our transactions in Fortaleza, they are usually kind of straightforward. What we see in Fortaleza, lots of people trying to sell a property before they should be selling. So, for instance, there is a probate. There are 3 children, and in theory, they should finish up the probate first to sell the property, and then they record their ownerships on the title, and then they are gonna sell the property as the sellers of record. But it's super common. Like as soon as these people they are in the probate, they need money. They wanna buy a new car. They wanna pay off their mortgage. They get in a frenzy to sell the property, right? And that's when usually buyers are gonna hire us to make sure that this thing is gonna work out at the end. Okay, so this is super common in Fortaleza. I don't know, maybe because of the dynamics, but probates like. Probably 30% of the properties that show up for us, they are going to be in a probate, okay? What else for Fortaleza? People don't like to receive money from abroad, so we are hired to assist with the money transfer part of it. For those who do not know, Brazil has a history of super hyper regulation of monies entering the country. You make a wire transfer, money does not arrive at the seller, right? Money never arrives at the destination. Money is caught by the recipient bank's compliance, and you're gonna endure a crazy compliance process before the money is gonna be released. So many sellers, they're gonna say, you know what, your problem. You're gonna pay me as a local. So some buyers, they're gonna hire us to assist with the currency exchange part of it. In the process, we usually get a better exchange rate. So at the end of the day, they are paying for our services, but they're getting a better exchange rate, which kind of it's a wash, right? Like so, they get our service almost for free. Okay, they are paying for a service, but they're getting a better rate. So at the end of the day, like everybody is better off. Okay, more difficult when compared to Rio or São Paulo. Yeah, Rio and São Paulo, they're pretty good markets, right? Like usually, like you're talking about the two more developed states and cities, right? Like São Paulo state. Capital of São Paulo is São Paulo. Capital of the São Paulo state is the São Paulo city. Same thing with Rio de Janeiro. You have the state of Rio de Janeiro. Capital of Rio de Janeiro is the city of Rio de Janeiro. So whenever you're talking both at the state level or the city level, very developed areas of Brazil, and differently from Florianópolis, which is developed, but they do have title issues. São Paulo and Rio, usually they don't have issues with titles, okay? They're pretty solid on the title side. Rio de Janeiro, there is a substantial aging population, also common for sellers to be in the probate stage. They don't want to wait. And then you need to hire someone to, figure out the probate thing, because again, the realtors are gonna explain that as this is super common. Oh, it's just a probate, but that's super common, and actually it's kind of common from an occurrence perspective, but from a title perspective, if you're paying someone who's not the legal owner, there is a bridge in terms of a legal ownership. So it's important for you to structure the contract, and most importantly, the timing of the final payment, right? And the tip is pretty easy. You're not gonna pay until this thing is being transferred legally to your name, right? And both in São Paulo and Rio, we have several years of relationship with the registries. So whenever we're gonna assist with a transaction, the final step of the property acquisition is going to be in a registry of our trust, meaning that the registry officer is someone who has been working with us for several years, and they are not going to let any type of defective paper to slip into the transaction, right? In addition to our own checks, right? Like we also do the due diligence, but the final step is like on a certain day, everybody shows up, documents are on the table, there are the certificates of clearance, and that's usually when something not desirable could happen in terms of paperwork or in terms of a defective participation of the seller. But again, if this is happening under our control, we can avoid, last minute risks being added to the closing. All right. I hope this helps. So, Hightower 52, thank you again, Hightower, for your participation. And our next live is gonna be on Sunday. It's gonna be on Sunday, the 24th. It's gonna be at 3:30 Rio de Janeiro time. I hope to see you again. If you are still with us, please like this live stream so other people can keep coming. I forgot, I should have said that at the beginning. Like our live stream, because that's important for other people to find our live, our channel. And save your questions for Sunday, and I hope to see you then. Have a blessed rest of your day.